Hello and welcome to SHOWstudio. It's spring-summer 19 in fashion, and Fashion Week is right now in New York. We are going to talk about Sies Marjan, which is a very young brand. 3 years ago it was founded and it's in its 6th collection. Before going into it, I would like to ask my panelists to introduce themselves, starting from you, Katie.
Hello, so I'm Katie Barron and I'm a writer and an author and I'm the head of retail for Trends and Futures business stylist.
Hi, I'm Todd Lynn. I'm a fashion designer based in London.
Hi, my name's Lotte Andersen and I'm an artist.
Hi, I'm Anastasiia and I'm a curator and writer contributing to Days, the wallpaper, SHOWstudio and other titles.
Good. Thank you for being here. So, Sies Marjan, we all know, is designed by Sander Lack, who was working with Dries Van Noten for many years before and others, and received this phone call from this company backed by Nancy Marks, who used to own or invested in Ralph Lauren.
Yeah, they were the...
And he found himself being at the creative head of startups that wasn't a startups because they had an atelier, they had pattern cutters, they had office, infrastructure, money, everything. So quite amazing. And sometimes you think when you start with that much money, maybe it could be the kiss of death. But actually it wasn't. I mean, since his first collection, that was very much talked about because of the way he was born and because also of the fact that he was coming from very important roles with very important designers. The whole of the fashion intelligentsia was there, the top press was there. So he started on a high note. Barney's bought and exclusively sold his first collection, and it took off. So before going into this show, I would like to have a word with you about how does it work? I mean, is talent as important as financial backing? How does it work? I mean, I have my own opinion, but I would like to hear yours.
Well, I would say that he was in a position, I mean, he had to make a choice of working on it for a design brand on a team, or having his own label, or like being given his own label kind of to run, although he doesn't finance it. And he obviously chose that. But I think also that, was it his second or third season? He had second season they had 28 doors?
Yeah, immediately.
So
the first one, it was Barney's exclusive.
No brand off the mark without that type of backing has 28 doors on the first season.
Does it come from the backing or from the fact that Barney's was interested and that made everybody else?
No, it also comes from the fact that the retailers know that the financing is there to support it. Okay. So that when they do the order, they know that they're going to get the delivery. Hopefully they're going to get the delivery on time and all that. But like I'm saying is, most young brands or young designers don't have that opportunity.
And beyond the logistics, there must be a kind of credence in the fact that, there was the Dries Van Noten background, and even there's like a small time at Philip Lim. I think he did a stint at Philip Lim as well.
Yes, and Marc Jacobs as well.
So I guess it's the kind of coalescence of all those things means that it's a viable proposition in lots of ways, right? I mean, you probably know more about how that works than I would, but
my thing is about. I mean, what Todd and what you said is that they, of course, important factors, but is it good? I mean, what about the collection? That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, does it matter at the beginning?
Those are super wearable clothes. So if you make wearable clothes and you have the ability to hit the ground running, it kind of works out.
Plus, I think at the beginning, one of the things that's kind of interesting about him is that he's I'm trying to because when I was looking at Sies Marjan, I was thinking, okay, let's try and work out, like as you say, why is there such a kind of hoo-ha about this? Because when you look at the collection, sometimes you're like, you don't get that kind of bolt of lightning when you look at this stuff. Like you said earlier, you said there's a bit of a slow burn at times.
Yeah, it grows in you.
But the thing I find interesting, and you shouldn't really have to do this as someone that's like buying the clothes, is when you read a lot of the interviews with him, there's something interesting about the attitude, I think, of not referencing a lot of other stuff, just kind of having a collection which doesn't seem to kind of reference a lot of historical periods, that doesn't seem to rehash things particularly. So I think there was some kind of appeal in that it felt like it was quite fresh, where you'd have a lot of other designers, maybe particularly in New York, who it was all about having, retrospective collections, fleshing out your archives, or I don't know, there felt like there was something about this that was like wholly of itself.
Well, he
is quite
can't
rare
really
now.
freshen up his archives because he.
No, not him, but I mean with other people, maybe it was interesting to have a designer where it's just
Yeah,
a
but
bit
also
like,
I think where I agree with you is that you like it or not, but it's quite authentic. I don't think he's trying to be anybody else, which it sounds like an understatement, but it's very important today because there is a lot of that.
To me, it's very interesting how do you basically get the attention and how do you get the headlines in the media sphere, where basically everyone's seemingly only interested in which creative director went to which huge global brand, particularly in the luxury sector, or like the latest drop of Supreme or something, which people seems to be most interested in. So to me, it's kind of the making of the story, particularly in the luxury segment, is really kind of what makes you or breaks you, I suppose, in media at least. So I guess they had this story with color, which went quite a long way.
With color?
With color, yeah. So
Probably because of Dries before him?
Probably, but it's just basically, I have a feeling that your story has to be kind of simple in a way. It has to be almost a one-liner for the press to pick it up and then spread it around.
Oh, so you say that's a positive thing?
It is a positive thing to me because, I just kind of had a look at what has been written about the brand, and it's mostly, the color was mostly the thing everybody was talking about. And apart from Business of Fashion, whose headline was a luxury brand which came out of thin air, I think.
That was a big BOF article about, at the beginning, I think it was just after his collection, where they also were telling the story about how it happened financially and where was the backing coming from. About color, and we will look at, we will watch this collection immediately, but everybody's doing color now. So that could be a problem, because I was discussing just before we went live with someone about the fact that someone said, oh, I don't think his color were as strong. And I said, well, no, maybe it's because if you saw the Escada show or the Telfer show, I mean, it's color everywhere, strong orange, strong red, and so you don't notice as much. Even if he still has these very warm autumnal colors that come from
this collection is kind of weird, because it's weird, like the first few shots that come out that I saw when it was on Vogue first thing this morning were actually, there's like a kind of really pale beige sort of safari type suit, and all of a sudden, and actually, and I think, personally, I don't know what everyone else thinks, but when I look at this show, it's the colour stuff that really works. Some of the other stuff I think actually is a little bit, maybe it's a slow burn, but it just not really setting my world alight at all. So I almost feel like when you take the colour away from his work, the rest of the sensibility, it's almost a bit like, it's like a synesthetic thing, that actually his use of colour and his understanding of colour is so critical to his world and how he sees the world, how he sees his people, his kind of muses, if you like, that when you take that away, it's almost like he doesn't really know what he's doing with it. So it's not kind of, what I'm saying is it's not just thinking about colour as a kind of surface layer, it's about sort of understanding how you see the world aesthetically, and if colour is so key to that, it's like, I think maybe he struggles to kind of build a story, to tell a story without using colour, because and just the colour ones to me, I feel like if I didn't know that this was his work, I wouldn't even necessarily think it was
Shall we look at it?
Actually, some of it.
It's funny though, because I wonder whether that was also potentially like he's done it on purpose, because he's being pigeonholed as it's color and fluidity, and if he's not careful, once that's over, the brand won't exist anymore, it won't work. So maybe when you go into the showroom, you're going to see all the fluid and all the color, because that's probably what they're going to sell, and maybe they're going to project something else in the media, like Runway and that, which is to try and also test things, see what people respond to, and then see how it works. I'm just sort of saying, I don't know, because I don't know what the showroom looks like, but that was one thing that I thought about when I saw this, because it is a bit of a departure.
Shall we watch the show? Because I think that's very interesting, and we can discuss this on practically every look, and while we're waiting for it to happen, because I think we have a film, maybe a word about the casting. It was friends and family mainly. There were some models and some of the top new models, but he cast his mom, so Marjan, Sies is his father and Marjan is his mother, and then most of his friends and some of
everyone wants to be like
he did
homemade.
it. But he did it in his first show in 2016. So he did his campaign with his girlfriend.
Right, it is trendy. It's
very
trendy,
like
and,
as well.
and it's also kind of.
He did it before.
And when I sort of hear that, because I saw again someone else, there's a quick write-up about it this morning, and it was like amazing casting, and you're like, yeah, it's interesting casting, but of course, Body Map did this way back.
I think it's got to do with like not wanting to seem like this like evil huge corporation. I think brands
Yeah.
want to seem like approachable and warm and holistic, and they don't want to seem like the man. Like that's not cool anymore. It's not.
Especially if the headlines have all been about
it's not.
where did the big backing come from for this, etc. And so all of a sudden people are like, well, he's a new designer, but he's got humongous corporate backing.
Yeah, or like Jacquemus does it, or like Molly Goddard does it, or like all these, even like a
Cows like that Telfar do it as like a whole family community vibe.
I think Telfar is only that. They don't even have professional models.
Yeah, I mean,
But I mean,
that's
trendy,
why
but I
it's a
must
different
say
story.
That's part of his narrative, and it's been from the beginning. His first campaign was with his 4 girlfriends. I think it's trendy, but it's also relevant today, as you were
That's what
saying.
I don't mean trendy in a scathing way.
Yeah.
I mean relevant.
But looking at the show now, I just seen a look that passed by. I think there are a few things that are a little bit complicated. I don't know, maybe Todd as a designer, I don't know why, but there are a few things that could have been probably, because one of his signature for me, apart from color, is fluidity. These silks and crepe that were fluid, and now here sometimes it's a little bit weird.
I don't know, none of us really know his work that well because he's quite new, but one thing that I do notice potentially is that maybe he needs more development time in understanding the cut, because I know they have a big team. They have a huge team of people cutting things, and I'm wondering whether his direction of cut isn't necessarily as advanced as, say, other people. So, because they're very capable people doing this stuff, but I know how it works, in that
Maybe
the
doesn't
creative
have the right
director,
direction.
what the creative director directs is what they do, even though they're very good at it. And sometimes the dynamic can be that you need to let them just get on with it, and then they can kind of create magic. And sometimes if you're a little bit more directive, you can actually almost pull away, because I notice some of the cuts are a little bit complicated or a little bit, I don't know, they're not as developed, they don't seem as developed.
But
Even
so
on
you're
the last
telling
show.
me that if you want a ruche on a shirt here, which I think it's a little bit too much, but if it's,
Well, that's probably a
if you
styling
direct
thing.
it in the right way, no, that was the look that her mom, I mean, when we see his mom, the look that his mom is wearing, I think it's a miss, and it's a pity,
no, I agree,
because that's his
I
mom,
agree.
and I'm going to, she's got a
I think the proportion is a bit awkward.
like a marine, like blue and white shirt with a denim.
Because if you're kind of talking about using your friends and family, and you're kind of wanting to show your diversity from a very personal approach, you kind of want those people to look amazing, don't you? So actually, it's a sort of double miss, I think.
Well, but probably, he must have liked it, otherwise he wouldn't have done it. No, that's not this one. But and it's not about, I'm not talking about what I like and what I don't like. That's not interesting. Maybe the mom just passed.
I think it was actually, now that I saw
That was
it,
the
I
mom,
thought
but
it
we
was a
will
lighter
see it
top.
in the photos afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's about why complicating things when, is it because you feel compelled to seem more creative or whatever?
Retailers are always desperate for something new, but what they actually want is the same thing, but new. So I think it's very complicated. Exactly, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So I think that they're obviously trying to come up with new versions of things, but by doing that, you end up complicating them.
I think this is where you're kind of, what's interesting about what you're saying about the cutting, something that we wouldn't really be able to spot, that, there was a nice quote from him. I really like some of his sort of sound bites where he said things like, there's a lot of stuff out there where people will just kind of, I want that beautiful thing, but without the crap on it. We're not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel. And I found that really refreshing from a designer, to actually to be a little bit kind of, bit more truthful, or maybe it's not truthful, maybe it's just his perspective, actually kind of getting rid of some of this noise. And there was something really refreshing about that. But then to do that, it's like being a chef or something. You have to, like with what you have, you have to be like at the peak of technical excellence, right? So if you're not, that's a problem.
I mean, it's like you speak to someone like Sarah Burton, and the pared down simple shows that they used to do, those were the hard ones.
Yeah.
Those are the ones, because if something's wrong, if there's a hair out of place,
You see
it's a beacon. And so I think this idea of simplicity is really difficult to do. You kind of like push it to the side and think, oh, it's really easy. It's like, no, it's the opposite. Because you're right. By putting bells and whistles and making tricks and things, you hide
the
everything.
myths, yeah.
You hide all the mistakes because no one's looking at that. So I think it's and maybe with him it's just like a question of time. You know,
But on the other hand, there are one or two jackets and tailor looks that I think really look good. And I thought that was the most difficult to do, but that's when we know that he has a very good cutter.
Yeah. And also, but he can direct them, because I think we realize how creative directors are actually so important with directing teams. It's not just the fact that the team are good, they need to be told what to do. And then that's when the magic happens.
It's one of my favorite looks in the show, and it's...
Yeah, and he'll have... Because I think they've got like 35 people in the atelier or something.
Yeah, they've got...
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's a huge operation. It's not just...
Yeah, it's not... Yeah.
Like London, it's like you're lucky if you have 5 people. You know, and you might get 7 before the show. Like it's... So he's got an amazing opportunity, which
but he's very grateful, and he's very vocal about that. And I read a thing where he was saying, before saying yes, I had 1 week of nausea, because I was thinking, it's very weird, you know, it's going to be a startup, I have carte blanche, but then all this infrastructure around. Sometimes it's almost scarier because the pressure on you is quite big, you know.
Where was he directly before here?
Dries, was he?
Dries.
Yeah.
And what was his position?
We don't know. High position, I think.
It was quite high because it was known by the press, or I don't know,
like design director,
studio director, or design director, but it was quite high. Yeah.
And I think also, which most people would think it's not that important, but I think it's huge that he seems like a very nice person.
Yes.
And I think it's massively
so important. Yeah.
Because that's when you get the press to support you, type of thing, and they will stick with you, type of thing.
Do you think that's really interesting?
I think
do you not
it's
think
super
press
important.
sometimes, and I'm kind of part press myself in a way, do you not think press like the drama?
I don't. Well, I don't think that.
You have any schizophrenia.
I think we've moved out of that moment.
Yeah.
Like there's so much about the family casting, and like the kind of people don't want that anymore.
But maybe not the drama. What I'm saying is maybe more to rephrase that the story, an exciting story, a juicy story, because there are a lot of bland stories. There are a lot of very corporate stories, business moves that are really quite dull. Actually, to find what any journalist is looking for isn't necessarily the sensationalism. It's like the untold story. That's really what you...
I think I would imagine, I'm not a journalist, I don't know, but I would imagine they would like that, but at some point there is a limit where you don't want to slum it to go and see someone, or like to do the interview, or to then these guys will obviously have budget to treat the press very well. Yeah. They'll all be taken care of to a degree. And I think that, and also, but at the end of the day, the product has to live up to something, some sort of standard. It's
exactly.
That's a question for me actually. Is this a brand which is about the product, or is this a brand which is about the story? So, and can you actually successfully do both, or which one in the end works better?
But that was my first question, because I still think that the product has to live up to.
Yeah, I think particularly in that like price range and in that niche, it's definitely about the product. And actually, to me, before it was quite refreshing that they were talking about particular garments which are simple, and it is up to the garments to sort of lure you in. It's not really about
for me, this is the product. I don't think the story is that.
I mean, the story, I guess, is just
supportive. The story can be interesting in the first 2 weeks, in the first 2 seasons maybe. But then if you don't have a product that sells, you just disappear.
But funny enough, I think with this particular collection, it's maybe for me not quite as strong as the previous one, partly because I think maybe he feels a pressure to layer in this story, whereas before it was all a bit more enigmatic. It was literally like, this is about colours, when you have colours in there, like acid washed, and you leave them out in the Tuscan sun somewhere, and it all felt a bit like, that for me in terms of a story kind of really worked, because it was just like, it was like a lightning bolt of his brain, his aesthetic brain popping down. All of a sudden here, I feel like there's some kind of, it feels a little bit awkward that it's about my family life and these kinds of things. And you're like, that's great. Sometimes that translates really well. Like I think sometimes people they mainline something from their own life and it's so potent. Whereas for this, I feel like it's just not really translating that well. To me, anyway, I'm not really feeling it emotionally. I'm not. Aspect. Yeah, when someone's like, well, it's about my mum and my dad and my family now, but I can't. For some reason, I just don't think it's connecting over. I think it's totally viable to use whatever references, whatever creatively makes sense. But I think maybe for here it's just not. I'm not sort of feeling. If I'm not feeling it for some reason.
When you read the,
and yet I see some going forward. I see some maturity to it. Yeah, it's not my favorite aesthetically, but I think it's a grown-up show.
Sometimes I think you have to have
Todd
these
was
slightly
saying, it
awkward
shows
ones.
his skills on different things, and probably, you know, I remember when I was in New York and I went to see his first collection at Barney, so literally in the store, and I was a little bit underwhelmed compared to what I saw in the show, and you know, they didn't buy much, and the way things were hanging, it was a little bit poor, if I may say. And then it was successful, so I was completely wrong, but it didn't look so appealing to me. While this, I think, will look much better on a store floor.
But this is one thing that I wonder, though, is that you sort of said exactly that, like you weren't impressed. It looked poor in that. So how much of this kind of becomes a bit of a press bubble that becomes the press love it, they have the budget to support it, the stores can do it, everybody, and then that's the thing is, I think for them, or for him, he's in a hard position now, because now that kind of bubble is going to start to end, because there's always someone else, and it's like, how do you maintain that kind of excitement? And I think that's really hard.
But all the stores would not be still around if he didn't sell.
He has to sell through. So, and what do you think he's on, season 6?
Yes.
And how many seasons has he done? We don't know. See, that's the thing. But
where? What?
Like in terms of, well, he did one season exclusive with Barney's, and then the other 5 are wholesale.
Yes.
Right. So
Wholesales,
I mean,
and
if it's
they
still
don't
growing,
they
then
don't do mid-seasons, but they drop.
They do drops. They do
They
two
do
drops.
drops in a way that they keep it up,
So
but they don't do
one collection divided into 2 for
Yes,
pre-collection
exactly.
and resort, and so that, which is really clever actually, because that means they can contain their.
And also they contain the cost of production and everything, you know. it's-
I haven't actually seen any of his clothes in the flesh. What are they like? Because obviously, because you know here,
We saw the one that was at the Met.
because I feel a bit like I'm saying all these things, but like texturally they might be incredible. He might be using the most
I've
amazing
never tried them, so I don't know the fit.
And we're just looking at these flat two-dimensional images.
You look very Sies Marjan today.
Well, I mean, I'm really pro it. I love drees. I love texture. I love color. I love all of this kind of soft silhouette. I mean, also, we've not talked about textiles. And really, I mean, to get that kind of deep color or like acidy, you really need to know what you're doing with that. So maybe that's where he's putting his time less towards the cutting and more towards fabric development. You know, they did all those reflective jackets that look grey in daytime and then completely crazy, I don't know, like in a nightclub or something.
Well,
What do you think about Dudson with his dress?
I don't know about that.
I mean, it's not my personal thing.
It's also the styling, and the styling also, not just the dress, right?
So what do you mean, the hair and everything around it? The shoes?
Well, very 2000, very 2000s.
Modern, but
I'd
the
like
dress
to
could
go out
be.
on a limb and say it's a little bit Eurovision.
Damn, look
for
at her
me.
legs there.
You know, maybe that's.
But
a
I
bit
must say
too
one
far, I
thing,
don't know.
that's very much red carpets in America. Very often. You see amazing clothes on people on a red carpet in America, and you're like, what the heck? You know what I mean? Because of the stylist, and this is really not very relevant.
Maybe it might have looked better on someone else. But
How do you can define else?
not to Dudson, but you know, it's just that those colours and that cut.
But the
you need like
shoes,
someone
the
really
I think it
young,
might look better
really
on
like-
a pop star or something,
someone-
like maybe like
Yes,
a rapper or
I think
something.
you're
It's just
right.
like a bit more out there, a little bit more. Whereas putting it on like a very traditionally, conventionally
I think
beautiful
the
model.
piece needs a character.
Yeah,
It's missing
that's
a character. It's just not it can't be
Yeah,
just
but so if a piece needs a character, it doesn't mean that the piece doesn't hold up on its own? I mean, there are some things that you can put on
I have a feeling-
monkey and they look amazing, you know what I mean?
I have a feeling this is kind of clothes which actually really needs the right communication structure around it.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking same about the runway as like as a presentation tool, right? Because I remember I was on Alex's panel and we were talking about it a lot as well, because Alex is also really much about the product and about just the pieces you really want even from a picture, but then on the runway somehow it just doesn't really look as convincing as it does in other contexts. And maybe it's also true about his pieces. Yeah, just
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the runway doesn't really do him any favours, particularly. I think more context around it or some sort of representation. Maybe it doesn't even need a catwalk show. I don't know.
And maybe that's when he can step back again. It feels like when you read this, there does feel like some kind of like pressure for him to really be an identity and be like a face or something. But I don't think you can just let your clothes be and stick them on wicked people.
Plus,
and put the right infrastructure around it.
But are you talking
That's
about
a good point.
catwalk? Though I wonder what would this in another city? What would happen?
In another
That's a
city,
really good.
as if you were showing in London,
or
what would happen?
I don't know, but I think the thing is that we also know that New York has this kind of like they need shows. They need these shows to pop things, because I mean, people used to come back and they would be surprised that nothing was exciting for them, bar a couple. And I think this is an opportunity in New York that he can make a mark. I'm not saying it wouldn't work somewhere else. I'm sort of saying I wonder what the trajectory would be if it had been in London or if it had been in Paris, or I don't know.
Yeah, and what kind of vibe would it have? Would it have a different casting? Would it have different? Because just New York shows tend to be a bit more commercial in terms of all the other.
So this one is so not commercial, like New York commercial. It's still it's quite different.
I think exactly. I think it does stand out.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm still quite positive about it. I'm rather positive also because I'm a little bit biasedly positive about the work he's doing. But I also think one of the problems of this show is that the last one was really good.
I'd like to cut
So
this
maybe
show
if that
apart.
was his
second
album,
album.
I would like to put out like 50, maybe even just as little as 40% of this show, and just have that as its little in itself. Because I'm a fan as well, So that's the thing. Like, so I'm aware that I'm saying things that are quite negative by and large, but there are pieces here that I think are really great. I just think they need to be extracted and actually lose some of the stuff that looks a bit lacking in sort of skill and actually so most of the stuff I'm looking at is the kind of colour stuff. It's like where you've got these huge big trench coats and you've got the kind of these different colour tonal variations, because I think Lotte, you were talking about it before, that it's very hard to you can't underestimate how difficult it is to have that kind of colour brain. I mean, I work with people in our business that they call them COMAT specialists, colour material specialists, and I've been in meetings where they've sat with really big clients and they're like, for 2020, it's not black, it's black, black. But it's not black, 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 it's black, black.
Black, black.
First of all, you're like, what the hell are you talking about? And then actually you go into their world a bit and you're like, it really is that subtle. And, we're dealing with this, that idea of moving into a much more sensorial in real life world, or even in the mixed reality world.
Also the way they react
really
on fabrics,
important.
and apparently there are some interesting fabrics here.
Yeah.
If you read, I mean, there's some plastic, can it be worked in a certain way? There's some prints that we don't really see here. But,
exactly, because I think some of the prints, there's a guy
interesting.
that's got like it's almost like a sort of pajama set, and then he's got a cardigan over it. And I think for me, I feel that everything's a bit more emotive where he's using pattern, print or colour. For somehow I just feel it's much more evocative. I feel like, okay, I don't totally know who this person is. And I think also his, before he's talked about when people have said that classic sort of journalist question, who's your muse? And he's like, well, I don't have it. Or they specifically said, who's your woman? And he's like, well, I don't have a woman. I have, but he's like, I have people. I have the Sies Marjan people. And I think with some of the colour pieces where you've got these trench coats, actually, there is a kind of gender-free, and I'm saying that rather than gender-neutral, like a gender-free aspect to them, that I feel that his belief in just having a more general certain uses comes through.
I think that's part of the relevance.
If I was like creative director, I'd be
I think that's part of the
that.
relevance. That's very modern, and he's young. I mean, but he's 33. He's not a millennial. He's not 20. That's the mother.
Yes.
There it's bang in the middle. I think it's a little bit.
That's what he does very little. He did a bit of the eye thing last time, but he doesn't do a lot of hair and makeup.
But all the nautical stuff just feels a bit kind of low grade to me. It feels a bit sort of, like I feel his heart isn't in those pieces. I don't know if that's a sort of his commercial decision, like you say, to move away from
that they are reminding him of his father, who died when he was very young, so he really cared.
But that's what I mean, it's funny because for some reason, but that story just doesn't translate to me. I'm not feeling it through the clothes, so it might be there. Like the same thing with this guy, that actually take that out of here. Whereas there's something about the colour that I feel like that's his connection to whoever he is creatively and his spirit, and that slightly more sort of like playful randomness that's when he manages to channel that and really pop that for me. So, you know, I mean, that sometimes, I mean, I think, you know, with creative people, that's what happens, that you want to do something, but there are certain places where we all work best. There are certain places where we find our essence. I think whether you're a writer or designer or anyone, and sometimes it's about recognizing those. And so that's for me why I would love to just have half this collection, and the rest I think is brilliant.
You should be allowed. I feel like it's difficult, you know, and like you have a hit, and that's your hit, that's what people come back to you for. Of course you have to do it, you're going to make it, but you have to be able to just try something out, feel it out.
Yeah.
And he's allowed to make a...
I do, but I think the menswear should be there.
I wanted to go to.
don't
That's
think
the
it's
second.
strong
Let me
enough,
just
and I think it
tell
pulls
the
down.
people. It's the second. You guys are difficult.
Just tell the people, Todd.
It's the second only collection where he injects some menswear. So that's really still in the. You know, he did only women's wear, and that's what he's done all his life. Now he's starting to do men. I personally think that it's unnecessary, but sorry, I give the floor back to you.
No, I think even when I looked at the first time he did it, I just thought it's not in terms of the menswear that's out there, because there are a lot of strong menswear designers, a lot of strong collections that are mixing as well, and I think that it's not strong enough to be on that platform. I'm not saying he shouldn't do it. There's obviously a market to sell the product, but I think, or I'm assuming there is, but I just think what it does is it dilutes the vision of the show and makes it, in my opinion, not as strong as it should be. I think that if he took that out, it also may change the dynamics of what the women's wear looks like as well, and make it a bit more focused. That's just my opinion, but...
Yeah, I tend to agree. It didn't do much for me, probably apart from one look, the young Gerber son, what's his name? Kaya's brother.
Oh, okay.
Presley Gerber with the red look, which, by the way, I think it's gender fluid.
Yeah.
It could be a woman's look as well. Can you go up a little bit more and show us this? Yeah, it's just no, down. Sorry, down. There you go. Stop. So probably that's the one that stands up the most because it's colorful, because it's his material, but it's not.
But as a
really
menswear look,
useful.
it doesn't really say much to me.
No.
Like, you know, not without being supported by other things that
I
kind
think
of
there is a
connect
pressure
it.
on menswear, probably by the retailers as well, because as we know, men's is what is growing the fastest at the moment. And when you're a hip brand that it's wanted, then maybe people ask you to do men.
Plus, he probably wants to wear the clothes himself. That's quite.
He says it.
He always does, right?
He says, I wear my men's and women.
Yeah.
I preach what I do. So
A lot of male designers who do women's wear want to do some menswear, so they have a few things that they can wear as well. I get it.
which you did as well.
Yeah. Well, I started menswear first, actually.
you started menswear.
But it's like that's. I understand that. I just don't know whether it needs to be in the show. That's all.
What do you think?
I kind of agree with you on the point that the previous one was so good, because I still remember certain looks from there. There's like gradient colors, and that's actually, if you look at we all look at a lot of pictures from
Can we
fashion
see
shows.
the previous show, if
And
possible? Thanks.
if something sticks in your mind, even though the designer is not even that famous, or you haven't heard about him before, that's a really powerful thing. If you manage to like leave that imprint.
So you really like it for the collection and not for the
Yeah, I mean,
narrative.
exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't even know who it was, but
This
that's
was so strong.
But the set here is also really brilliant and amazing. There's so many things there, like suddenly like the girls look more awake.
See,
They look slightly more like they're in an airport in the last show. It's so much more transient. This is a show.
and it feels like you say, the airport thing. I mean, this feels like it's the narrative goes right through because the thread is really strong. The core essence of this is really strong.
It's really polished. The infrastructure is there. The
you
light
feel like
is
there's
there.
one idea and it's been extrapolated and it's worked and it's been pumped through. Even if some of the items are pretty different, it's been pumped through every kind of fibre of this collection. Whereas this current collection, like you say, it feels a little bit fractured. And I think partly for me, it maybe goes back to this idea that it's about, when someone says, it's about my family, my friends, unless there's a kind of particular part of
It's about
that
my
world.
art and
Like
my
if,
craft,
yeah, it's a little bit too general. It's a bit kind of too nebulous. And
everyone has this, right?
Everyone has this, yeah, exactly.
So on the one hand, it's relatable. On the other hand, you have to tell the
So
specific.
it's almost like, what is the very specific thing about your family or your friends that you're trying to communicate, and how are you spinning that out? And for me, so it just feels a little bit jumbled and a bit fractured. And
You know, when you say the models look more awake, I think in a way, maybe they feel more beautiful. You know, sometimes, I don't know, you dealt with models, Todd, a lot, but sometimes, you know, they're models, so they have to wear what you put on them and they have to have the hair the way you decide. But if you don't feel well in it,
I think they're professional, they do their job, but when they're happy and they like what they're wearing, it's a little bit more. But that's
and here
they just
they're
have to happen.
happier.
Yeah, you would say that they're professional. They can
it's
fake
their
it
job,
till they make
but
it.
still,
But I
they're
think
human beings.
when you love what you're wearing even more and you're in a good environment, you
It's a
show.
bit awkward, isn't it? Or his mates aren't really enjoying wearing his clothes that much. Therefore, we'd have to assume in a current world.
But also,
No.
I have a feeling this one also, it looks right for where it sits in terms of it looks like a luxury is a bad word, but it does look kind of lush and beautiful,
Luxurious.
and it looks luxurious, and it's kind of you want to be part of that even if you're not the consumer for it, and like the latest one is a bit of kind of it feels more accessible. That's where it loses because you don't want it as much.
Yeah, it's too accessible. You're right.
Sies Marjan much more. So I get you when you say maybe, you know, he's compelled to show that he can do something more, that he can move forward, but this is so much like who he is, you know, and it shows.
I think you know, when you're talking about Anastasiia, the accessibility, that's the key thing for me with this collection. The looks that don't work are ones that feel, you know, there's a big difference between things feeling intimate and things feeling accessible. And that accessible sometimes can actually, when you're looking at high fashion, can just be too banal, I think. You know, if it's...
You mean accessible in shape or in price? In wearability or in...
I've no idea, you know, what those things are going to price at, so I'm totally just
Quite
talking
expensive.
about... Yeah, it probably is, which will just makes it even worse. So I think when you look at some of those, for me, I'm going to go back to the nautical ones, because those are the ones that are standing out for me as the least appealing of all of them. They feel accessible. I feel like I could see them on any high street. I feel like conceptually, you know, the cut, on all of those levels, I feel like they lose in comparison to some of the other stuff.
Do we know where it's produced? Is it produced in America?
2,600, that lovely dress. It's quite expensive.
I was talking about the new collection.
Because if it's produced in America, that could be a price thing as well.
That's why, because
the
it's
import
more
here will be more than it would. Yeah, if it's produced in Europe, then.
And we cannot see prices in dollars here. I think.
No, if you saw, I don't know what it is in America, but it might be
a little bit
less. It's still expensive, but I have a big problem because I think they PR themselves as a luxury fashion brand, and like you said, I have a problem with this word because I think everybody pops that on to a brand to make the margin higher. Yeah, to make it like, you know, they sort of think if it's expensive, it must be luxury. It's like, you know.
Not always the case, yeah.
No, because you can go to Marks and Spencer's and get luxury biscuits. You know, like everything.
But I feel not necessarily though, because like a sweatshirt can be £1,500 these days, and that's not luxury.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
You wouldn't, but it's still retails at the same price.
But they love to put the luxury so they feel like it has this.
That's a whole panel. I mean,
exactly.
Much to say about that. I don't think Sies Marjan is in that category. I think it is much more, you know, fashion, and you know they have
contemporary fashion,
pattern cutters, and they have production in house. So it's all made in America, I guess. So, you know, but it is rather expensive, not for what it is, because you know we've seen much more outrageous things in fashion. But you know, just to summarize, I think he's a good designer. I think he's a great potential. I think he has to be careful not to be too much pressured by the 40 powerful wholesaler or whatever, how many they are, that is, you know, selling at by his partner. Apparently his CEO and his backer are very open to let him do what he wants, but I think he has a great potential to be one of the, you know, upcoming important brands.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I think so. I have to say, like, I think personally, it's a time will tell. You know, I think he's talented. I think the product is a good product. I think there's a massive buzz. It's a PR buzz. It's a bubble. Let's see You know, it's like, you know, we were saying earlier about other people. In 5 years, they may not be relevant.
Yeah.
And it's also
so quick nowadays.
It's probably
You
still
don't know
finding
what's
his
gonna
team,
happen.
like we were saying. He's still probably finding his creative accomplices, and I think that's part of that journey as well, isn't it? When you're on a bigger stage, on your own, finding out who those people are that really, when you're creating a collection, the stylist that you're working with. I think that will make a big
I
difference.
do think that sometimes when you have that much buzz at the beginning, it could be dangerous because then people have expectations on you that are, you know, unrealistic or whatever. But I still am convinced that Sander Luck is a good designer with a good school behind, a good potential, and he's a good guy, which I'm convinced it helps. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next step. Not my favorite show. Probably again the last one I thought was really, really good, and that's also why we started noticing it, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to give him a panel because and I don't know, maybe it will grow on me. Last words? Some
No, to
conclusions?
me sometimes it feels like less is more, as if the more concise and the more like articulate you are. Both visually and in terms of story, your collection is the better, just because there's so much stuff out there that if it's enough to see one look, that's the best. And that was the case about the previous show, but not about this one.
So you're a bit underwhelmed here as well.
A little bit, but also like, yeah, I think it's more really about the presentation rather than the clothes even. So again, if the show was a bit shorter, like fewer looks, maybe that would have worked better. Or if the styling was different, or if the set was different.
Well. It could be new stylists or new people working with new people, but it changes, and that dynamic may take another season before it starts to solidify
Actually, I
itself.
don't know if Marisha styled the other one who was still Lotte Volkova.
I think it was still Lotte, I think. And I think you can see some, I think I can see a lot of Marie Shea here in the slightly 80s silhouettes, especially with the kind of the trenches and the billowing trousers and things like that. And I think Marie Shea is a really, really good stylist, actually. I think the issue is it's more about that consolidating your relationships and your dynamics.
Yeah.
And, you know, like we say, you know, we're in a weird kind of world at the moment where everything's supposed to happen like fast track. And sometimes it just takes a bit to embed, hence why for me my final word would definitely be I'm going to forget like 50% of the looks and totally take on board the other 50% that I think are really strong, and definitely look for next season. So yeah.
Final words to the artist.
It's difficult for me because I'd actually wear quite a lot of it. That's the bit that's tricky, is we're talking a lot about like infrastructure and the communication of the brand, but like when I just look directly at the clothes, bar all of these nautical ones, you know, I can just see stuff that I want to take on holiday, you know, and I want to like get up and wear really easily and not think too much about. Sure, I'd like drop all the menswear, but it's difficult when I can just see actual clothing.
Which is a good point.
Yeah, which is accessible, and I understand now why everyone is buying it. I mean, really, we're having a conversation about branding and about growth rather than about
when it fits.
what you want. But again, that's taste, I guess, also.
But we're also we're in a fashion moment where it is about clothes. It's about
very much.
Yeah.
So this, if
that's
anything,
why it's even more important.
Doesn't mean this fits in the dynamics of what's actually happening.
But that's why it's important to talk about like who he is, like where is his happy space, where is the thing that makes him sing. And for me, I just feel it's like the stuff I get this like joyous moment. I mean, like you, there's like a handful of stuff that I definitely wear here, but I'm just other stuff that I just not I feel like he's not feeling. It's not even that I'm not feeling it, it's like I feel like he's not feeling, because it's even irrelevant whether I would wear it. I mean, who cares really? But the point is, when I look at these clothes, do I see this sort of, is there something in it where you feel like this is him? Yeah, this one's him, this one's him, this one, I don't know who that belongs to. Do you know what I mean? That's what I feel.
Yeah.
But I think it's evolving. So there's enough here, like you say, that would still say to me, it's a really talented designer.
Yeah, and I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I just said it's going to be wanted and it's going to sell. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.